They just assume that it's not going to work well. But I've got 3 legislators that are going to be testifying that actually are under term limits or have been under term limits. And so they're the ones that should know, not just somebody that's assuming. And that's what made it 12 years, too.
I know in the last session when the start of the 85th, I know it was 3.5 years was the average term limit for a legislator in the House from our tenure. So,
well, and again, it's not necessarily that we have a lot of turnover. We do, but we have a lot that there is no turnover, and that's where some of the problem enters. So,
I mean, I'm coming into my 4th term, and members of my class are in the low 50s on seniority out of 150.
Okay. Right, I agree.
Any questions for Representative Biedermann? I see none. We'll pull you back up to close.
Close, thank you.
Chair calls Terry Holcomb, Matt Long, Nicholas Segalakis, Kelly Ward. Please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill. Is Kelly Ward here? I'm sorry. Yeah. Please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill. Sir, you can start.
My name is Matt Long, and I am representing the Fredericksburg Tea Party as well as myself, and I'm here to speak in support of this bill. In fact, I'd like to say this ought to be the easiest no-brainer bill that's coming before this committee today, because every one of you can say yes, you pass it on, get it out of here, get it onto the floor. Everybody says yes, and who gets to have the last say is the citizens of the great state of Texas, and they can decide. And I want to speak to the 2-year term thing. If we're familiar on the federal level with the Federalist Papers, the idea behind a 2-year term at the federal level was that those were the people who handled the money, and so they were the ones that we needed to hold accountable the fastest. And so as much as I love Representative Biedermann, I don't like the idea of going to a 4-year term. I think we need to be able to send him home every 2 years if we need to, get him out of there and put someone back in. But I am still supporting him, and he's a great guy. And so there's that 2-year thing there. And I do have to say that at the Democratic National Platform, and it was painful for me to read it this afternoon, but I did find in the Democratic National Platform very clearly a call for term limits. I could not find it in the Texas Democrat platform, but in the national platform it was there. In the Texas Republican Party platform, it is definitely there. So we've got the Democrats, the National Democrats, the Texas Republicans, all on the same side. You guys will have a hard time explaining a no vote, but this is easy cheesy. Send this home, pass this out of here, send it to the voters, and let the voters decide. And I guess one more thing I thought of at the very last second was in the Bible when the people of Israel asked for a king, and God said, "You don't want a king." And they said, "Yes, we want a king," so God gave them a king, and they had to pay for the problems of that. So perhaps this might be something where the people are saying, we want term limits. God gives them term limits, and it may come back in a few years, and they might say, you know what, I don't know if we want this term limits, but at least it'll be in the hands of the people of the state of Texas. And so once again, I'd like to ask you to support this bill, and thank you for Representative Biedermann for bringing this up. It's been asked for by people for many, many years now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Raymond.
And for the record, let me be clear. I would support 2 years, 2 year, 2 year, 2 year. I would. I was just suggesting, and I guess I'll ask you, just so I'd be curious, if you knew that nothing would pass or something that would pass at 12 years, but it would be 3-4-year terms, because what happens up here, like in life, sometimes we have to compromise our position to try to get something moving. So do you think if you had a choice between nothing or 3-4-year terms at 12 years? Right?
I think I would take the 4-year terms. Okay. Yes, I think I would agree to that.
Well, that's, and I'm telling you, I would support keeping it at 2.
Okay.
I'm just trying to help Mr. Biedermann figure out how to have a better chance at doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon or good evening, committee members, Madam Vice Chair. I appreciate you having me here. My name is Dr. Kelly Ward, the Honorable Kelly Ward. I am a military wife, the mom of 3 awesome kids. family physician and a former Arizona state senator. I have served in a legislature that has term limits, and I'm speaking in support of this bill. We are supposed to be a citizen-led legislature. Our founders did not ever envision having a professional political class, career politicians, so to speak. Term limits is very, very popular among voters. I traveled the campaign trail many times, and the biggest question that I got when I was out, whether it was young voters, older voters, conservative voters, or more liberal voters, across the board, the number one question that I got whenever I took questions on those occasions was, do you support term limits? And I have wholeheartedly supported term limits. You all have heard the old adage that politicians and diapers need to be changed often and for the same reason. So this is our opportunity to be able to do that. There was a study done in 2018, and it showed 82% of the voters, regardless of political party, support term limits. Now, so who opposes this? Lobbyists, some staffers, some journalists, and academics. Who supports it? The voters. So what are the theoretical cons? That we're going to lose institutional knowledge among members. This is unfounded. I was in the legislature for 2 terms. I was a very effective legislature, getting 19 bills signed into law in 1 year alone. It also gives members an opportunity to take leadership positions a little bit more quickly. It increases mentorship. It increases training opportunities. The second thing, the second theoretical con is increased power of the lobbyists and increased power of the staff. I just haven't seen it happen in Arizona. The pros, we get new blood, we get fresh ideas, we allow political parties to deepen their bench across the board, we build more meaningful legislative teamwork across the board, and it creates more opportunities to train both locally and nationally. It diversifies our legislatures, and it is a good opportunity. It's worked well since 1992 in Arizona, and I urge you all to send this to the ballot in Texas.
Chairman Raymond.
You know, I guess I would ask you for us to reflect on this. The most important, I think what most people would acknowledge is the most important elected position in this country, President of the United States, is limited to 8 years. It seems to work, right? It seems to work.
Representative Raymond, we don't question term limits many times for the president. We don't question them for our governors in many cases, and we don't question that there wouldn't be enough institutional knowledge or training at those levels. But why do we question that among ourselves? There was a study or a quote that said, elected officials are not potted plants. We are able to learn, we're able to respond, we're able to do this job and do it quickly. Our founders understood it, and I think everyone on this committee understands it as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep. Representative
I
Harless.
came in late. You may have stated it, and if you did, I apologize. What are your term limits right now?
I did not. Thank you for that question. In Arizona, we have 4 consecutive terms in the House or 4 consecutive terms in the Senate. Both of those are 2 years, so it would be 8 years and 8 years. Though there is a way to kind of go around that, as many legislators have found. You can serve 8 years in the House or 6 years in the House. Go to the Senate for 2 years and then come back to the House for 4. Then go to the Senate for 8. Go back to the House for 2. So we do not have lifetime term limits. We have consecutive term limits.
Thank you.
Chairman Springer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess also it may be a little bit easier than it would be in Texas because you've got 30 senators and 60 House members in Arizona where we're at 150 and 31.
It is a smaller legislature, which can be a little bit more manageable. However, I think
I just meant manageable from playing the game and going back and forth because there's
Yes.
2 House members trying to compete for the 1 Senate spot, whereas in ours it would be 5 for 1.
Yes, and because you're not doing it in a staggered way, that could be a problem, but I think that's probably something that the sponsor or some other people who are interested in this could take into account and create maybe a staggered term of when those term limits would start so that there would never be the case where there were 2 House members competing for 1 Senate seat.
Or we could just up the number of senators.
I want to keep government small.
You have a question? I'm sorry, Chairman Desto.
I just, like Representative Raymond, on the 4-year 3-4-year terms. I mean, I'm not adamantly opposed or feeling either way about term limits or not. I mean, I don't normally. The question I have, though, is what made me think of this is the situation in Arizona where you would run and then you go to the Senate 2 years and come back and run to the House. And I'm trying to reconcile that with your testimony. What the people want is to limit terms. And if they want to limit terms, why do they re-elect people for 50 years and then you say they want to limit, or you take them from here and you move them over here and you take them back again? If they really want to limit, they wouldn't do that. I mean, I'm trying to reconcile that. I'm not trying to argue. I'm trying to understand the testimony that majority of people want term. Well, if the majority of people want term limits, they wouldn't be electing the same people over and over.
Right, I understand that completely, and I do think it's gaming the system when people go back and forth a bit, because it does go against the
citizens I'm talking about.
Yes.
The citizens don't have to elect that person back.
That's right. Because one of the arguments is that we have term limits at the ballot box, but those term limits at the ballot box don't exist because of the power of the incumbency, their ability to raise money, and their ability to have name recognition within their district and even statewide. It is, as well as the support of the lobbying community, the political action committees that are out there who can support them financially to be able to hold on to those seats. So the public is not always introduced to the potential candidates or the potential representatives that they might have. Term limits give that opportunity to the people to see those fresh new voices, to hear those new ideas that could be coming from both sides of the aisle. When you think about the 12-year term, 12 years is a long time. It's enough time really to start an agenda, to accomplish a lot of it, and then to pass the torch to the next generation. Many times that passing of the torch hasn't happened in our country or in our states. And so the legislative process becomes stagnant, it becomes stale, it becomes difficult to get things done. And just to drive it home, if you've ever gone on a diet, if you haven't lost weight in 12 years, you're probably not going to. And so it might be time to pass that torch to the next generation and try to get something accomplished for the people.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Springer.
Thank you. In Arizona, do they have maximum amounts you can raise from a donor on a campaign, like the federal level?
Yes, it's the same limits, I believe, still at the state level. When I first started, it was $424, but it's up to the federal limits at this point, I believe.
And I think that's potentially one of the differences in Texas. It's we have unlimited, and so if somebody doesn't like somebody, and we've seen the campaigns where a single donor who is unhappy with an incumbent will drop $250,000 in on somebody, and so it does make it to where it's a little easier to challenge an incumbent. And we've seen a lot of chairmen lose their races to those type of things.
I didn't do the research to know what the turnover rate is in the Texas legislature, but I do know for the United States Senate, we reelect our United States senators 90% of the time, whether people enjoy what they're doing or not. And so,
I came in with a class of 43 out of 150.
Okay.
And the next one I think was 32, and I think there was a 26 was the next, so somewhere in those range.
Good.
Any other questions for the witness? Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Nicholas Sigalak.
I was just going to follow up on Ms. Springers. I think last session, 116 of the 150 members had been here 4 terms or less. 4 2-year terms.
All right. I think we're ready for you now.
Thank you. Howdy. My name is Nicholas Sigalakis. I'm representing myself, and I'm for this bill. I think there's no better person to explain why we should have term limits than Mrs. Ward, but even just hearing the back and forth dialogue that you just had, I think Mr. Springer just expressed a good point. He expressed that, there is a threat that over $250,000 could go into a race here in Texas, and the problem with that is then who are you going to be representing? Are you going to be representing the one donor? Or are you going to be representing the people? I think term limits take that threat off. Mrs. Ward also mentioned during her speech very much that, at least in my opinion, the academics appears to be where term limits has the biggest opposition besides lobbyists. And I'll go against my professors in saying that I believe this is a means of being able to allow you to be able to better engage in dialogue with with your constituents when you do not have to always worry about who you're facing in the upcoming election. In terms of donors and anything else, when you can get back to the nature of a democracy, especially as in what the Texas House should look like, then I believe that would enable us to be able to meet the needs of our constituents and better represent them here in Texas. Thank you.
Any question for the witness? I see none. Thank you. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. The chair calls Matt Caldwell and Alan Skillicorn. Please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Caldwell, former member of the Florida House of Representatives. And I'd be remiss, although it's a shame Representative Smithy and Guerra aren't here. My wife is a native Texan. She's born in Deaf Smith, but her family has been in Hidalgo County since before Texas was a republic. So I definitely need to give her a shout out. If our daughter had been born here rather than Florida, she wouldn't be an 8th generation Floridian. She would be at least a 9th generation Texan. So hoorah for the state of Texas as well. But my experience has been in the state of Florida. To give you a little background, I served from 2010 till 2018. We have 8-year term limits, so I served the full capacity under 2-year terms. My experience, I think, will be reflective of what occurs in a term-limited body. Elected at the age of 29, I served all 8 years on our State Affairs Committee. A little bit larger jurisdiction. I did some of the math. You got about 12 committees that cover the territory we covered: environment, regulation, natural resources, transportation, local government, pensions, elections, etc. We do ours with subcommittees. So as a sophomore, I was a subcommittee chair, and then for my last 4 years, the chair of the full committee and on the House leadership team, and had the opportunity immediately to have impact on legislation, to be involved in the process, and to be developing the positions on a number of issues without having to wait an inordinate amount of time. There's a number of things that we could cover. Ms. Ward covered a good bit of it, but I wanted to just note, above everything else, there is no single issue you're going to debate in any legislative session in which all 3 groups of people you represent, Republicans, Democrats, and third-party individuals, in which your citizens not only have a formed opinion, but they've expressed it overwhelmingly in combination with each other in support of this issue. There is nothing else that comes close to touching this in terms of its level of support and the intensity with which each of those 3 groups have a formed opinion and will be willing to espouse it. There's a number of things I can talk about on background, how our House and Senate operated before term limits, how it did afterward, what experience we've seen in the state of Florida as a result of having term limits, which I think was ultimately beneficial for the people. And I'll leave it to your questions if you'd like to expand on those. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I see no questions. Sir, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm Alan Skillicorn, State Representative in the state of Illinois. I support this bill, and we do not have term limits in Illinois. So first I want to thank Mr. Chairman, Ms. Vice Chair, and committee members for your time this evening. So in Illinois, we have a Speaker of the House that was first elected before I was even born. That person was born in 1970. When that Speaker was elected, the price of gasoline was only 36 cents a gallon. A loaf of bread was only 25 cents. A postage stamp was only 6 cents to mail a letter. So over the last 50 years, the Speaker of the House in Illinois has amassed such power and wealth that he has little use for the governor, other legislators, or the people of Illinois. Literally passing a budget that requires reforms if it does not please the Speaker, it's just not happening. So Illinois represents a case study of why term limits are necessary and useful to you and the people. So just a little bit of the background here. Fiscally, Illinois is a basket case. The following statistics are, so October 2018, America Center said that Illinois was ranked last in fiscal solvency in the United States. Wallet Hub on March 12th reported that Illinois has the highest state and local tax burden of the United States. Illinois is ranked number 2 for years behind New Jersey in the highest property tax burden in the nation. Depending on how you measure our unfunded liabilities and our pension liabilities, we rank in the top 3. We have the lowest credit rating of any state. In August of 2018, Moody's reported their state pension liabilities are at $250 billion, which is 601% of our sole income source. The national average is only 107%. Every major government entity, including the largest city of Chicago, is rated by junk by the rating agencies. We have experienced a net out-migration for the past 5 years, and one of only 2 states, despite having the 5th largest GDP in the states and a diverse economy. Literally hundreds of people are leaving Illinois to even come to Texas every single day. And I'm open to any and all questions.
Representative Harless.
How long have you been in office?
This is my 3rd year in office, and I came in with a very large freshman class. Literally about a third of the legislature overturned in 16. So literally the average, not unlike Texas, most people don't serve this long. Most don't serve 12 years. But the average is just over 6 in Illinois. So really for the rank and file legislator, a 12-year term limit would not affect them. It only affect effectively the people that are the problem cases.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see none. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on for or against the resolution? If not, Chair recognizes Representative Biedermann to close on his resolution.
Thank you, Chairman and members. And as you can tell, there's more to it than just talking about term limits. We have people that have experienced it in their lives, in their legislature. The thing that wasn't brought out as much is how much or how little their government has grown and actually how much it's shrunk since they've had term limits. You look at the state of Florida for sure, in the last 20 years since they've had term limits, their size of government has decreased, not increased. And those are the things that happen with term limits. And so I would just ask that you would consider allowing the people to have a vote, and that we would do something so we can change the culture in Texas. We have to make sure that Texas stays the strongest state in the union, which means that we have to make sure that we don't lose what we have. And as we could see in the last number of years, there are things that are changing in Texas, and that means that we have to be open to change ourselves as legislators and make sure that we keep this the greatest state in the nation. I want to thank you, and I hope you'll give consideration to allowing the people to have a vote for term limits.
Chairman Springer?
Thank you, and I did want to, because I know I made a comment of 3.5. It was actually 3.5 sessions, not 3.5 years was the average. So I apologize on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Biedermann. The chair moves to leave H.J.R. 98 pending at this time. Is there any objection? Hearing none, H.J.R. 98 is left pending. Chair lays out House Bill 1041. Recognize Representative Wally to explain his bill.